Yes.
Okay, right. Okay, so basically the way I'm going to start off is we all know machine learning. Many of you must be aware of machine learning because initially we started when we started with artificial neural networks. We started with machine learning, and we know the various types of machine learning. We have the supervised model where you have regression and classification. So I'm not going through all that. I'm presuming you all know all that. Then you have the unsupervised model, where typically you have clustering and learning association as few of the methods. When I say learning association, could be the recommendation engine, which is provided by, say, Flipkart or Netflix when they recommend any movies or products on the internet. And then obviously you had the reinforcement learning, where we are talking about how using self-driving cars and robots, they basically work on reinforcement learning. So as the data became more complex, okay, generally initially the data was more of a linear, but as the data became more non-linear, data became more complex, and okay, it was not it and the amount of data was very huge. So there was a lot of challenge in terms of one processing of the data, and the second is obviously in terms of getting the accuracy of the model. And we found that typical machine learning models were not very accurate when it comes to processing large volume complex data, and wherever the data is non-linear. And so that's where the concept of deep learning came into picture. And when you look at deep learning, there are basically three classifications I can think about. One is, of course, the artificial neural networks, which I'm going to talk about. Then the second is the convolutional neural networks, which is mainly used for processing images. And convolutional neural networks is used in conjunction with artificial neural networks. So obviously, if you have to use CNN, you need to know ANN, right? And then obviously the latest, you have the recursive neural networks, where you have a sequence of sentences or sequence of words, and then the machine learning algorithm should be able to predict what could be the next word or the next sentence, right? That sort of a recursive neural networks came in. And today, I mean, there are various new technologies coming in, and I mean, there's a lot of research going on in artificial neural networks, in deep learning across various industries, right? For example, if I talk of mechanical engineering, how do you identify if you have an image? How do you identify an image if there is a defect in the product or not? So that image is captured, and then using machine learning algorithms, you can find whether a new image is an actual defective product or a non-defective product, right? Using machine learning. So today's concept today what we are going to talk about is essentially called the artificial neural networks. Now when I'm talking of artificial neural networks, all of you must be aware that when you say neural networks, we are talking of neurons. And when you're talking of neurons, which is in the human brain, so the neurons are basically uh, getting activated in the brain, and they're transmitting messages from one neuron to the another, and another neuron to another, and that's how the messages get transmitted in your brain. There are various nerve cells. And when you talk about the nerve cells, you essentially have the neuron which you see here. If you can see, this is the neuron, and these are the dendrites. Okay, these are the dendrites. Okay, or the inputs, you can call it. And then the information gets transmitted through the axon, okay, to the next neuron. So this is the way the neuron data gets transmitted to this, and there's an output here which becomes an input here. Then this again, there's an output from here to another neuron. So you could have multiple neurons. That's how the processing happens, okay, in the brain. The same concept came into programming, and that's where the artificial neural networks, when you're talking about, it's again they are talking about how you can process your data, okay, using something called a neurons, okay, in the ANN parlance. Now if you have heard about, say, regression and classification, for example, as part of the supervised model, you all know that you will have an output, which is your dependent variable, and your input or the features, which is your or the independent variable and dependent variable. Now there could be number of features which could decide the output. Now that either could be a linear output, it means a continuous output, which is the case of a regression, or it could be a discrete output where you could have a fixed set of images, or you could have whether a person is having cancer or not, or whether it's 0 on 1, where you have a discrete set of values, and that's where you have sort of a classification data sets. So the various inputs that you require, which are the features, okay? And these are the features which are inputs which are going to various neurons. I will get into more detail. I'm just trying to give you the architecture. So these are the various inputs or the independent variables which form an input to the various neurons. Okay, these neurons get activated based on some function. I will tell you about all that. And there are various, and you could have multiple layers. Okay, so again, the number of layers depends upon the complexity of your algorithms, the complexity of your data, and again it comes to experience. Okay, we have seen that if you have more number of hidden layers, the accuracy could be more, but then beyond a particular time, it may not increase. So you will have to decide the optimum number of hidden layers. And obviously, you need to have an output, which is your dependent variable. Your output is a dependent variable, and the output could be either 0 and 1, or it could be a continuous variable if there's a regression data, or between an output, you could have a single probability data where you could have 0 and 1, or multi-probabilistic data, where if you have an image and you can say if an image is a cat, the probability of the output because of this neural networks could be maybe 67%. It's a cat, 30% could be a dog, or 10% could be a horse. I'm just giving an example. So you have a multiple probabilistic situation where the sum of all the probabilities is 100%. Okay, and then there are something called activation functions, which I will talk to you later. But for this, for now, just understand that when I'm trying to, if you go to this slide, when I'm trying to map this to my neural networks in ANN, so this is my dendrites or the inputs, right? This is my neurons, okay? And then this is an output, okay? Now you could have multiple neurons. This is okay. There could be multiple neurons in the hidden layer. That could be 4, 5, 6. Again, it depends on experience. You could have one hidden layer. You could have multiple hidden layers, and there'll be one output layer. So when I'm going to show you some examples, some assignments, which I'm going to show you some use case, you will see that how hidden layers are used and how do you basically measure the accuracy of your model, right? So this is how you're going to map the whatever you see in your neuron brains to actual. This is how you will see it, okay, in an artificial neural network. When you talk of an artificial neural network, you could have a single, what is called a perceptron, okay, where you have a single neuron, and the output could be a binary classifier. It could be 0 and 1. Or you could have multiple neurons and they are all interconnected. This is called an interconnected neuron layer. Interconnected layer. So because all these neurons are connected to each other, this is called an interconnected layer. So you have input, you have got one layer of hidden layers, you have got second set of hidden layers, and finally you have a output. Okay. And I will just tell you about, so I'll introduce your weights later. So what happens is at each point of time, you introduce weights. These weights are some arbitrary numbers which are multiplied by the input variable. That means if you got 3 features or 4 independent variables, you will have weights assigned to each feature, and then using some activation function, you get an output value. Okay. Now, can somebody tell me what is a cost function? Does anybody know what is a cost function? Can anybody throw me some light on what is a cost function? If you have learned, if you have gone through a standard regression model in machine learning, anybody can throw some light on what is cost function?
Fitness value.
What value?
Fitness.
Can you just be a bit more elaborate on that, please?
Fitness value.
Fitness value. Okay, so
fitness function.
then I'm not talking. Okay, let me see. For example, how does a model work? Okay, so when you talk of a model, you first of all train the model. You already know that. So see, because it's a big exam, I'm assuming that you all understand what is training set, what is test set. I'm not getting into all that. Okay, so once you train the model and you have come out with a pattern, right? You come out with a pattern. Okay, then what you do is when you're going to evaluate the model, when you're going to evaluate the efficiency or the accuracy of the model, you need to first calculate the predicted dependent variable, predicted output. This predicted output is y caret. You generally represent by y caret. Y caret. Okay. And there is an actual output where basically this is the actual output of the test data. When you're doing an evaluation, you're doing an evaluation on the test set, right? Now, when you're doing the evaluation on the test set, you predict the output, which is called the y caret, and the actual output of the test data, which is y, right? Just give the same, okay? And then if your model has to be accurate, then obviously your y, that is the predicted value, y cat, and the y actual has to be close to each other. And if this is translated into an equation where you're saying sigma sum of yi minus y the whole square, okay, this is what I'm talking about. So half yi minus y minus y caret the whole square, y caret the whole square, okay, the square value of that. This function is called the cost function. And the main purpose to calculate the accuracy of your model, you need to ensure that the cost function is minimum. Because if for my cost function to be minimum, my predicted value and the actual value has to be close to each other. Okay. So whenever you talk of cost function, it is also called ordinary least squares, or it is sometimes called the mean square error. Okay. So you have to minimize the mean square error, or you call the minimize the cost function in order for your model to be accurate. Now, when I'm in the industry, as you know, that no model gives you an accuracy of 100%. Today, we are not even, today we have been doing a lot of research, but obviously, since you're talking of a machine doing the work and trying to derive some patterns, you may not be able to get 100% accuracy. But in the industry, the accepted benchmark is 90-95%. So even if I get an accuracy of 90 to 95%, that is good enough for me to recommend that model to the client. Okay, so it's very important that what is going to be a benchmark when you're going to recommend a model to the client. And typically today, 90-95% is something which we always propose to the client if that model gives you that accuracy for that specific set of data. Okay, so if you have, I hope you have understood this concept of cost functions. This is very important, right? And I really don't know how much of background you guys are from in terms of machine learning, but I'm assuming a lot of things you know. But I'm just trying to refresh this cost function because I'm going to repeat this multiple times as I go through these presentations. Okay, fine. So we talked about interconnected layers. We talked about a perceptron where we are a single neuron. Now, then what we talk about is a activation function. Okay. Now, why you require an activation function? Now, if you see, you have the various inputs, your input features, you apply the weights, okay? Then you apply the activation function, okay, in the neurons. These activation functions help us to limit the value of the output. For example, if I am a classification model and in my classification value is going to be say 0 and 1, so my activation function should be such that the output should get limited to either 0 or 1. Okay, and the way it is represented is Z equal to W, which is my weights. I will talk to you about what weights is all about, into X, which is your input features, plus B, where B is a bias. And there is, okay, and then you calculate Z equal to Wx plus B, which is your activation function. And this activation function, there are multiple activation functions which help to limit the value of the output, okay, which will help to limit the value of the output going to the output layer, right? So there are various activation functions you use at the input, at the hidden layer. There are various activation functions you use at the output layer, okay? What is the need of the activation function? So activation, as I said, today, as the data becomes more non-linear, it is more of a polynomial sort of a nature. The activation function is used to perform complex computations in the hidden layers and then transfer the result to the output layer, as I told you. The primary function is to introduce non-linear properties into the network. As I said, that I have to limit the values to a specific set of values, say 0 and 1, right? Because if it's a classification data. So they convert the linear signals into a non-linear output signals to facilitate the learning of high order polynomials. Okay, because in deep networks, it is not just a linear network, it could be polynomial, it could be very complex sort of network. So you need to have activation functions which will help to limit those values depending on whether you're using a regression sort of a data or whether you're using a classification type of data, right? So the task of a neural network is to compute highly complicated calculations, and neural network cannot learn and model other complex. So if you have to basically model complicated data like images, speech, audio, you need to have activation functions, which will limit the values and basically convert it into a non-linear function. Okay, so this is the very, very significant use of the activation functions. Some of the activation functions that that we today use in the industry, one is called the threshold function, or it is also called the softmax. Okay, and this activation function is typically used in the classification, in classification and in the output layer. And the output layer could be either binary probability, that means 0 or 1, or it could be multi-class probability, where I talk to you about multiple percentages where the total percentage becomes 100%. And the value typically varies from 0 to 1. Okay, so y becomes between 0 and 1. Okay, this is one of the functions. Okay, the second function is called the sigmoid function, which is also used in the output layer, but it is typically used when you have a binary classification. That means if my values are 0 and 1, I can use the sigmoid. But if my output is having multiple classes like 50, 20, and 30, which is total 100%, multi-class probabilities, then I will go for the softmax or the threshold functions. Okay. Any questions till this point? Anybody has any thoughts, any questions?
Good morning, sir.
Yeah, good morning.
Can you please explain again the difference between the sigmoid and the threshold functions when we need to take for the multi-class?
So when you're having a multi-class, that means your output will have a probability of say 30%. It's not going to be 0 or 1. It could be a multiple probability values. Could be, maybe if I say that my output could be an image 1, image 2, image 3, and the probability of image 1 is 60%, probability of the image 2 is 20%, probability of image is 20%, total 100%. That's a multi-probabilistic feature probability. That is where you will go for the softmax or the threshold. Okay. If you are
Okay, sir.
going for binary where it is only 0 or 1, for example, a person is having cancer or not having cancer, okay, or a person is, so you are going to have only binary values, so you could go for either of them. But typically in what I'm going to show today, in most of the use cases that you see, they will typically use sigmoid for a binary classification. Okay.
Sir, one thing is like I am doing a work on the classification of diseases in agriculture field in citrus fruits, and so it's that means use to threshold there, na, instead of a sigmoid.
If you're going to have if your output is going to have multiple probabilistic values, then yes, you should go in for threshold or the softmax.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you so much, sir.
Any other questions, please? Somebody wants to share something, because please take it as a more collaborative. If you learn, if you want to share something which is more than what I am teaching you, please share it with all of us. But this is more of a learning exercise and a collaborative sort of a environment that we are talking about. Okay. So the next important function which is used in the hidden layers is called the rectifier linear unit. Okay, and that typically, again, if it's a classification values, it will again vary from 0, okay, to 1. Okay, it will vary from 0 to 1. And sigmoid RLU is the most important function. If you go to hidden layer, we always use RLU. That will again, as I said, any activation function will try to limit the value. Okay, so you use RLU for the hidden layers. Then there is something called the hyperbolic tangent. Now this is again used in classification, but it is mainly used in RNN or for NLPs and speech recognition, okay, where the typical values are between -1 to +1. Okay, so when you're talking about recursive neural networks where you use activation functions to limit the values, then you use the hyperbolic tangent. Then you have the linear activation function, which is used for output layer for a regression data. And I'm going to show you one example of a multiple regression where I've used linear activation function as part of the output. Okay, so when you're talking about a linear activation, so when you're talking about regression data, multiple regression data, we use linear activation function for the output layer. Okay. So if I want to sort of put an overall picture, so you have the inputs, you have the weights, you have the activation function which is done, okay, at the neurons, and then after that it goes to the output layer. So this activation function, as I said, will limit the value in the output. So you will have activation functions at the hidden layer, you will have an activation functions at the output layer, right? So for example, I've said here I'm using rectifier activation functions. I'm using a sigmoid activation function because in this case, I'm going to have only binary classifiers, either 0 and 1 as my output. Okay. Now let's take an example. Suppose you have the area square feet, the bedroom size, the number of bedrooms, the distance to the city from your house, and the how old is your house, okay, whether it's a new house or this. Okay, now these are the parameters which decide the price of a house. Okay, so is this a multiple regression? You will agree that it is a multiple regression, all of you, because there are multiple features which decide the price of a house, which is again a continuous variable. If you were to have this data and if you were to feed this into an ANN model, then again you have to know which are the variables which are going to have the impact on the price. So you take those features or independent variables as inputs or as a part of the input layer. Then you will apply weights W1, X1, W2, X2, so on, and you will use these weights to activate the neurons. I will come to this neuron activation later, but just to give an example. So this will use to activate the neurons, and once these neurons are there, and then these neurons, then once the activation function is done, then your final output that will be determined by the model is again determined by your linear regression activation functions in the output layer. And this function has to work in such a way that my predicted price, which is coming out of the model, and the actual price, which is my data, should be the cost function has to be minimal. Okay, so when I'm actually going to show you one data about, I will run it through. I'll run it through you using Jupyter Notebook. I will show you the output, and you will see how the output is calculated using the various activation functions. So this is the example of a softmax activation, as I said, where you have a multi-probabilistic output. So you have the various inputs, the various hidden layers, and you have an output which could be a probability of 67%, 24%. It could be either this or this or this, and the probability of 67, 24, and 10%. Okay, so this could be one example of how you use a multiple output software of softmax activation, right? Now, before I come to this slide, I just want you to understand. Okay, I'll come to that later. Now, there is something called gradient descent. Now, gradient descent is the algorithm which is used mainly in regression, right? In gradient descent, there is something, these are the weights. There is a bias signal, and there is something called a learning rate. There is the weights, there is a bias, and there is a learning rate. This is what is called the cost function. And as I said, you have to ensure that your cost function is minimized. Okay, so your weights have to be adjusted in such a way. So let's read this. Weights are adjusted in every iteration. When I'm talking of iteration, means I'm taking a set of training data. I'm taking a set of training data. So the weights are adjusted in every iteration so as to reduce the cost function. Learning rate is changed after every iteration to reduce the cost function. Learning rate decides how much to adjust the weights in steps sizes so as to reach the minimum cost function. So the learning rate plays a very important, because as you go through an iteration, you get an output. You get suppose you get an output, and this output is not matching the actual, so there is an error. So based on the learning rate gets adjusted. It will readjust the weights so that when it readjusts the weights, it will again do a recalculation in such a way that your final output has to be close to your actual output. That means your accuracy has to be close to 100%, or your mean square error or cost function has to be minimal. That is what you have to observe. Okay. In ANN, there are two things. What is called a forward propagation. If somebody is not speaking, can you go on mute, please? Thank you. So when we are talking about basically when we are talking about forward propagation and backward propagation, your full ANN works on this concept. So what happens is you have the inputs, you have some input weights. These are inputted to the various neurons. Okay. The weights will decide the weights will decide to activate the neurons. Okay. Once the neurons get activated, this will activate this neuron, this will activate this neuron, and then your activation function, which is used for activating the neurons, that will basically decide the output. And as I said, you will have various activation functions which will decide whether you want to use which one into the hidden layer. Typically, we use the ReLU, and in the output layer, whether you use the linear activation function or the sigmoid or the threshold. Okay. Once this forward propagation takes place and there is an output, the output, that is the predicted value, is calculated. The predicted value which is derived is compared with the actual value. When it is compared with the actual value, wherever there is a gap between the predicted value and the actual value, so there is a backward propagation. That means your weights are adjusted. Your learning rate, because the algorithm has learned that there is some error. There is the learning rate gets adjusted, based on which the weights are also adjusted in such a way that there's a backward propagation, and it tries to get the errors to a minimum. So for every set of data, the training data, an iteration of training data, there'll be something called a forward propagation, where initially you have the weights, you do the activation, calculate the predicted output, compare with the actual output. Based on the error, the learning rate will get modified. Based on which the weights also will get updated, and you will try to minimize the cost function. So you will try to do this for every iteration of data. Now let me explain to you very nicely out here. Let's say this is your data on the left hand side, where you have got, this is a regression data. Now this regression data has got how many hours you studied, how many hours you have slept, how much of quiz you have passed, and depending on that, it will decide what is the percentage you will get in the exam, in the final exams. Now this becomes a sort of a regression data because you have got multiple features and there are various outputs. You could vary, right?
तो divide in the rest તમે कर लेજો 5 જણા.
Can you please go on mute, please?
Sure. हाँ ठीक છે. So
thank you. So what happens is that there are two types of gradient descent you have. One is called a batch gradient descent. So what happens is you take the complete set of data and you update weights only for the complete. You take the complete data and then the weights are adjusted after taking all the data combined. That means you take all the data and then the weights are adjusted. Okay, which is not the most optimal case because it's very, very computational intensive and it is never recommended. The most recommended method is the stochastic gradient, where you update the weights for every record or for a batch of records. So what happens is, suppose you have got 100 records of training data, you take 10 data, you take say 5 at a time. You take 5, okay, you update the weights, okay, do a forward propagation, backward propagation, take the next 5, take the weights, adjust the weights, do a forward propagation, backward propagation. So you do in a batch of 5 or you batch of 10. That batch size you decide based on your experience. Typically, I've seen you can take a batch size 10, you can take batch size 100 or 50. Okay, and depends again on the volume of records. If you got millions of records, you prefer a larger batch size, right? So you decide on the batch size, and then finally you, for each batch size, you will adjust the weights and then you will calculate the mean square error or the accuracy. Means accuracy obviously is inversely to mean square error. You want higher and less mean square error or the least cost function. So in stochastic gradient, adjust update weights after each training sample or batch of samples. And weights are adjusted in every iteration so as to reduce the cost function. Have you guys understood this particular slide? This is very, very important because this is where we are going to introduce the concept of epochs. Have you guys understood this concept of stochastic gradient descent?
Yes, sir.
Yes, yes, sir.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah, yeah.
Sir, you told that after each iteration, weights get
Yeah.
updated. But at the first time, what should be taken as weight,
Yes.
sir?
Yes.
Actually,
Yes.
how
Yes.
to put
Very
the
good
weights? And second question is, sir, what is bias, sir? Actually, I don't know what is bias. So please
So-
put some lights on bias, sir.
So bias is basically an adjustment to, it's an adjustment to get to basically to get your cost function minimized. So your bias is again, it's again linked to the learning rate. So you have to adjust the bias in such a way that you minimize your cost function. And coming to your main question of weights, right?
Yeah.
Look at this particular point. See this point by point. First of all, the way you start, randomly initialize the weights to small numbers. You can take any weight. You can take, generally you start with any random number, okay, but not 0. Input the first observation of your data set in the input layer. As I said, each feature will be x1, x2, x3. These are multiple features, and you have weights w1, x1, w2, x2, w3, x3, w4, x1. So you will have weights for each independent variable or each feature. Forward propagation from left to right, the neurons are activated in a way that the impact of each neuron's activation is limited by the weights. That the impact of such neuron activation is limited by the weights. Propagate the activation until you get the predicted y. So you've done a forward propagation from various hidden layers and you get a final output which is say y predict. Compare the predicted result to the actual result. So you compare y and y predict and measure the error. So if there's a difference between y and y predict, you find out the error. Backward propagation from right to left, the error is backward propagated. What does that mean? Update the weights according to how much they are responsible for the error. The learning rate decides by how much we update the weights. Very important. Update the weights according to how much they are responsible for the error. So you update the weights, and who decides the weights? How much is the weights to be adjusted? It is the learning rate. Okay, so this is how you do the backward propagation. So you repeat these steps for every set of data. So that means, suppose you have got thousands of training records, I will say that my batch size is 10. So I will do for the first set of 10 records, I will do 1 to 5. I will take the second set of 10 records, I will do 1 to 5. I will do the third set of 10 records, I will do 1 to 5 till I complete 100 records. Now these 100 records total, suppose I got 100 records, this complete set is called an epoch. And then I can decide how many epochs. Now I run for one set of data, then again I will readjust in the second, whatever learning experience I've got in the first epoch, I will take that learning and the learning rate is adjusted to calculate the weights for the next set of epoch. So I will take that learning rate, then again I will take a batch of 10 because my same size, so I will again run for the second epoch. I will do some learning. That learning, whatever I get, that learning rate I will use as my input for my next set of epoch. So this complete series of epochs is run. Suppose I've got 10 epochs, 100 epochs. I will run this 100 times. So one epoch is running one complete set of training data. Now, when I'm saying 10 epochs, I will run through 10 times through the complete set of training data, and I will do this. And what happens in the industry, you will start with say epochs 10, you start with epochs 20, 30, and see what is the mean square error, or you see what is the accuracy. Okay, and then you will probably come to a number of epochs which will probably give you the highest accuracy. Okay, so this algorithm is very, very complex. Okay, I'm just telling you the principle, but the idea here is you take a set of data. Suppose your total 1,000 training records, you take a batch of 10, because I'm talking about stochastic gradient descent. Because if I have to do everything and do a weights, that is not desirable. So as I do in a stochastic gradient descent, I will take a batch of data, which is called my batch size. I will do the forward propagation, backward propagation, take the next batch size, forward propagation, backward, again next 10, 10, 10 up to 100. So 10 times. I done a learning. So this is one epoch. Second time, whatever my learning, based on my learning, I will again adjust the weights. Continue this. Again, the third epoch, and so on. This is how, with every epoch, the expectation is the accuracy will go up. Is this principle clear to all of you? Have you guys understood this concept?
Yes, sir.
So if you are, see here what I'm very clearly saying, an epoch is a complete pass through a given data set, not to be confused with an iteration. When I say an iteration, I'm saying a batch size. Batch size of 20, I do one iteration. Okay, I do a forward and backward propagation. Then taken batch size, again backward forward propagation. So I do this. So when I run number of iterations, I complete one epoch. Right? So this is this. If you remember this particular slide, a very nice slide. This actually tells you the steps how it works. Now, if I go back to this, so I talked about this. So as I said, gradient descent and backward propagation are sometimes they're basically used interchangeably. But when you're saying backward propagation is a subset of gradient descent, which is the implementation of gradient descent in multiple layer neural networks. So in the multiple neural networks, you use backward propagation. We call it backward propagation. And as I said, we typically use stochastic gradient descent because unlike as against adjusting weights for the complete set of training data, I will take batch sizes and do the weight adjustment. Okay, that is where you use the stochastic gradient descent. Okay. So again, if you take this example, you have the inputs, you have the weights, you have the activation function, which is used to activate. Based on the weights, you have the activation function, and the activation function is to activate the neurons. Then you find out the output. Once the output is predicted, you compare with the actual output. This is your cost function, C equal to half y predicted minus y the whole square. Depending on the error, do a backward propagation. This is how you do it, right? So this is the typical way you are adjusting the weights. So every time when you're doing a backward propagation forward, you're adjusting the weights so as to minimize this mean square error of the cost function. So this is again the same thing. I'm just repeating it. So this completes my ANN architecture. Any questions on the ANN architecture before I get into something called data preprocessing? Because this is something you should know. I don't know how much you are aware of this, but when I'm running through some examples, this is very, very important. Anybody has any questions on the ANN architecture?
So one thing I want to know from this slide that when we are going to implement any classification technique, it is better to use MATLAB or a Python, because I am already familiar with the MATLAB and new to the Python.
Doesn't matter. You can use anything, whichever tool you're comfortable, or whichever your customer recommends, or whatever. That's fine. The tool does not matter. See, the algorithm, the concept is all the same. Whether you use MATLAB, you use Python, you use R, it doesn't matter.
Okay, so
Okay? It's just the libraries which differs from one language to other, right?
Okay, sir. Okay.
So my focus is more on Python because Python is extensively used in the industry. While MATLAB is also used, but in majority of the industry, I use people using Python, and that's why. So please don't get. Don't get. You need not be really bothered about a language, okay, or any particular platform. Just understand the concept.
Yes,
And
so
then
one.
yeah.
One problem that I'm facing is that sometime when we are making a code according to our requirement, we stuck at some point, and when we want to search it from the internet, we start browsing the concept on which I am studying. So I always get a lot of solutions in the Python, but I am unable to receive any type of solution or very few solutions regarding a MATLAB. And then again, I am just like holding up for a long time, and then feel okay. It's like done, and this is one type of you can say the frustration is come that when you are doing the same work again and again, and you are not reaching to a particular goal after spending a lot of days. So that is my concern means.
Actually, frankly, I am not really very.
Interested.
Can somebody go on mute, please? Yeah. See, frankly, I
It is
really
writing.
don't know much about MATLAB. Frankly, I have not worked on MATLAB. Let me be very frank. So I mainly worked on Python, and so I've used Python libraries. And I mean, I don't know how much of MATLAB I can comment, but yes, Python has been extensively used, and that's what I've been using, right? So
Sir. Okay, sir.
okay, so now some of the important things I want to tell you about data pre-processing. Why I want to talk about data pre-processing is that there are some pre-processing steps which need to do before we actually train the model. And whether this is a normal machine learning or ANN or whatever, you need to do some sort of a data pre-processing. Okay. Now, when I'm talking, can you go on mute, please? You're not. Okay. So when you're talking of the various important libraries in Python, we use three important libraries, which is NumPy, which is mainly used for numeric calculations. One is matplotlib, which is typically used for graphs. We have pandas, which is mainly used for importing data sets, right? You need whatever data sets you want to run your machine learning model, you need to import it into your system. So you have your data sets, which could be in CSV format, Excel format, PDF, whatever format it is, right? And then when we are talking specific to regression and classification, once you import your data set, you need to identify your dependent and independent variables, which I'm sure you must be aware. So you need to have, you could have X number of independent variables, which is also called the features, and you have a single dependent variable, which is your output, right? There's another important library which is very much used today, is called the Seaborn. And why Seaborn has become very important? Because Seaborn helps you to do a correlation between multiple variables. So if I want to have multiple features and I want to find the correlation between two variables, whether they are dependent on each other, they are independent of each other, okay, they're positively dependent, means if one increases, the other increases, they're negatively dependent, that means one increases, the other decreases, or they're independent of each other. So using the Seaborn becomes very easy to find out the correlation about various variables. Okay, and this is a very strong, and I will show you there in one of the examples that I'm going to run. I will show how the Seaborn library is how we implement it. Okay. Now, let me open Spider. Now I'm sure many of you must be aware of Spider Python, and just for everybody's information, the typical way of doing it is you install Anaconda Navigator, which is one of the open source softwares from the internet. And once you install the Anaconda Navigator, you have this Python Spider, you have the Jupyter Notebook, you have the R Studio, and various other tools which are available by which you can execute your machine learning scripts. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do now, I'm going to open one data set. I'm going to talk about pre-processing. Okay, it's very important you should know this so that you can appreciate when I actually run ANN model. Okay, so suppose I go to this one, there's a data pre-processing. I select this folder. Let me close this. I go to, so this is typically your place where you're going to execute the Python scripts. On the right hand side top, you have the help where you can get help on the any documentation on the commands that you're going to run. You have the variable explorer, that is the output of your data. So that means anything which you execute in your Python script, if you the output of that, any variable which is getting assigned will get shown under variable explorer. And this is the path which you select, and these are the files which you want to execute. Okay, this is how you select the path and the files within that path which you want to execute. You can write a new script, or you can, for now I'm just using one existing script. Okay, and I'm having a data set called data.csv. Okay, now can somebody tell me what sort of data is this? Is this a regression data or a classification data? You have the country, you have the age of a person, you have a salary of the person, and whether he is going to buy a specific brand of car or not. So there is a customer who is into automotive industry, and he is trying to evaluate.
Regression data, sir.
You are saying it is regression data. Why is it regression?
It will give the relationship.
So you're talking of when you're talking, okay, when you're talking of regression, then let me ask you, so are you talking that this is a multiple regression data?
Yes, sir.
Okay, if this is a multiple regression data, can you tell me which is your independent variable? Which is your dependent variable?
Yeah. So
Yeah, anybody can respond. Which is a dependent variable? So first of all, whether it's a regression classification, somebody has, yeah, please go ahead. So let me first explain you the problem statement, and then you come back to me. So as I was explaining, so I have an automotive company, and as an automotive company, I'm capturing the profile of all my customers, and there is a way that I click on something and I can decide whether a purchase is likely to buy this brand of car or not. So 0 means no, means is not going to buy the car, and yes means is going to buy the car. No means is not going to buy the car, and yes means he is going to buy the car. Okay, if that be the scenario, what sort of data is this? Is this a regression data or a classification data?
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah, sir. According to me, it's classification data because we are dividing into classes, two binary classes, that yes or no, whether he will purchase or not.
Very good. So your purchase, yes or no, becomes your dependent or independent variable. Which one is this?
Yeah, it's dependent on three things, na? Country, age, and salary. Yeah.
Correct. So your country, age, and salary becomes your independent variable, right? And your purchase,
Yeah,
yes or no,
purchase is
becomes your
dependent
dependent
variable. Yeah, yes, sir.
variable. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Now, assuming that this data I have, so what I'm going to do is first I will import my libraries. Say I import. So on the right hand side bottom is my console, where actually whatever I'm going to execute will be shown here on the right hand side. And if there is any error, will come here. Otherwise, it will go to the next prompt. Okay, now see this. I import my NumPy library. I import my pandas library and import my matplot and pandas. These are my three libraries I'm importing. Okay. Now, this is my data set I'm importing, which is the data set I've talked. And I can you please mute your mic, please? So when I go to my data set, when I'm importing my data set, this is my data. Okay. Now, do you see some problem in this data?
So there are certain missing values.
Correct. So there are some missing values which are null here. Okay. Now, for the time being, I'm just assuming that see, typically what happens when you get this data from your client, right? And I'm a data scientist, so I will have to spend a lot of time in my data preparation phase. Typically in a project, 60% of your time goes in data preparation, data pre-processing. And then your balance 40% goes into data training the model, evaluating the model, model optimization, and then finally model deployment, right? So you have to make sure that whatever data you're going to get is perfect, it's cleaned, doesn't have any redundant or missing data. Okay, removing all duplicate values is required. So all those things has to be taken care as part of your data preparation phase. And who is responsible for the data is the client. So you have to always make sure that the client gives you the right data, and it is up to you, and it's for you to follow with the client to ensure that the client is giving you the correct data. Okay, just to make sure that the client is giving you the correct data. Now, having said that, in this case, there is a null data, and for now, I'm just assuming that this missing values, I will fill it up with the average of salary, and the missing value here, I will take the average of the age. Okay, because the client has not been able to give you my missing data, so I'm just making some assumptions. So what I've done is, I will take the average of all the current salary, put it here. I will take the mean, or the mean, average means the mean. I will take the mean of all the ages for this particular data and put it in the missing value. So I'm not going to get into the details about the code, but for now, let me do one thing. I will first decide, I will identify my independent variable, which is X. I will identify my dependent variable, which is Y. So what is my X?
કરું પણ બિઝી આવતો હતો એમનો એટલે કે કામ હતું.
Can you please go on mute?
હા.
Okay. So now if I see my X is basically my independent variable, which is my age, country, and salary. And my Y is essentially my dependent variable, which is yes or no, whether the person is going to buy a car or not. Okay. Now, when I run this particular script, what will happen is the missing value will get replaced by the mean. So if you see X here, now see the X's, you will see 60,000 something and 38.7. So these are the missing age and salary for those rows where you had the NaN values or the null values. Okay, this is just an example of how do you take care of missing data. So this becomes very, very important that you need to clean your data. You need to make sure your data is clean, all duplicate data is removed, all redundant data is removed before you train the model, right? Now, one of the important things that you should also know is what is called the data characterization. Now, what is this data characterization? So if you see, there is a field called country, which is a text field. There's a field called country, which is a text field. Now, this text field is not understood by machine learning algorithms. They only understand numbers or numbers. Okay. So what we need to do is, we need to convert this text into a binary or a numerical format. And this process is called data characterization. And how the data characterization works is like this. So if I have, say, 3 countries, so I've got 3 countries, France, USA, and India. Okay. Now France, these are the 3 unique countries in my data. Now this France, USA and India, what I will do is I will convert this into serial numbers 0, 1 and 2. Internally, I'll convert into serial numbers depending on the number of countries. And then what I will do is I will convert this into an array of key variables, because there are three unique country values. So in that case, France, I'll represent it by 1, 0, 0. USA, I represent it as 0, 1, 0. And India, I will probably represent it as 0, 0, 1. So the presence of 1 means that a value exists in that particular array. Okay. So if I've got 5 countries, I will have an array of 5 variables. Okay. And so on. And this process of creating array is called dummy variables. And in the case of Python, this function, the function to convert this into 0, 1, 2 is called label encoder, and the function to convert into dummy variables is called one hot encoder. Have you guys understood this concept? What is data categorization? Anybody has any questions? Okay. So let me run it and show you. So now I'm going to use label encoder, one hot encoder, to convert this country into a number field. So first let me execute label encoder up to here. And now if you see the value of X, your country value has got replaced by 0, 1 and 2. Your country value has got replaced by 0, 1 and 2, right? Now let me execute the one hot encoder. Now I see the value of X. Now do you see that initially, which was country, it was converted 0, 1, 2. Now it is converted dummy of array of 3 dummy variables. So 1, 0, 0, 0, 1, 0 and so on. And then after that you had the age and the country. So you had basically initially where you had 3 independent variables. Now you have got 5 independent variables, because your country has got replaced. Your country has got replaced by 5 independent variables. Okay. Now, after we have done that, have you understood this concept, everybody? Unfortunately, your chat doesn't work. Otherwise, I would have expected yes or no answer on the screen.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay. So now, if you have understood this, so this is very, very important. Now, is there any other field that you need to do data categorization in here? You have already done for country. Do you have to do data categorization for any other field in this particular data? You have to do it for this.
Yes, sir. No.
For the purchase. Yeah, please go ahead.
Sir, we need to convert for a dependent variable. Y also need to convert as zeros and one also. Yes,
Very
sir?
good.
Isn't it,
Very, very good. So what I'm doing here now is I will also convert Y into 0 and 1. Now, but in the case of Y, I don't have to do one hot encoder. I only have to do label encoder because I need only binary 0 or 1. Okay, there are only 2 values. So when I do this, and if I see Y, now Y, which was initially yes or no, has become 0 and 1. Okay, this becomes data categorization, right? Now you also know this data split. You are aware of this. What will this do? Anybody? What will be the proportion of test set to training set?
70-30. So 70 will be training, 30 will be testing the data.
Why you are saying 70?
So like every time we consider this, that's training will be more samples and testing accordingly.
But for this particular code.
Okay, here, sorry, sir. Extremely sorry. It's 80-20. In general, I told you. Extremely sorry.
Yeah.
20% it's test size. 0.2 that is 20%.
Correct. So you will have 80% training set and 20% test set. And typically when you are doing the split, you will have 4 variables. That is xtrain, xtest for the independent variables and the ytrain, ytest for the dependent variables, right? So I will typically do this, right? So this is a must for before doing any data evaluation, data modeling, you have to do this split so that you can. And you know why you have to have a test set? Because to evaluate the model, you need to use the test data. And to train the model, you need to use the training data, right? There's one more
Excuse me,
thing.
sir, from where we get this data, sir? Training and test data?
No, so you had totally X, suppose there are 10 records and 4 columns, okay, which has become 10,5. I will split it into 2 records. This X, my data, I know which is my independent variable, right? And which is my dependent variable. So I will split my data into xtrain, xtest. So 2 records of test because there are 20% and 8 records of training set. Similarly, Y, I will split into ytest and ytrain. So ytest is 20% and ytrain is 80%. And there is no columns mentioned here because you will always have one dependent variable.
Yes, sir. But I want to know, sir, from where we get the training and train data, sir?
So this is your input source data. This is your data you have got from your client.
Okay.
This is your data you have got from the client, and you as a data scientist have been asked to come out with a model.
Okay,
so before coming out with a data model, coming out with a machine learning model, you have to do some data pre-processing steps. As I told you, data preparation phase, which is very, very important. And these are some of the data pre-processing steps that I'm talking about.
Can I interrupt here?
Yeah, sure.
So I actually what I guess that I want to know that as we are doing research work, all the faculty members, I think that they want to know regarding their any type of project, and might be they get a data set from the Kaggle site, that is, or if you are related to agriculture, you can go for the, like there are many sites available on if you search on a Google, so you will get a data site if you want to work on particular type of you can say in the agriculture or medical field, you will get a data from there because that is authenticated data, so that you can take.
So as Madam rightly said, there's a site called Kaggle.com where you get lots of data sets. There's a lot of competition which happens where there are a lot of competitions which are set up there to solve a particular problem. So this is the one data set which I've just taken as an example, but this data set will, so you're asking for the source of the data set. Is this my question correct?
Yes. Yes, sir. Yes.
So the source of the data set is your customer. A customer will give you this data set and you need to come out with a model. Kaggle.com, these only gives you some various data sets which are uploaded, for which you can practice so that you get some good experience handling various types of data. But in a live scenario, you will have this data coming from your client.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello. Sir,
Yeah,
I have a doubt, sir.
Yeah.
How can we segregate your train and test data, sir, for any type of the model?
So typically, when you say how do you train, means how? What was the main question? What is the percentage distribution, or how is it?
Actually, it is 70-30, sir.
No, it can be 70-30. It could be 80-20. It again depends on the type of data. It could be even 85-15. It really varies from lot of data. See, if you have large volumes of data, right, you could even keep 80-85% also. See, you should have maximum training data. Maximum of training data is very important because that's where more the data, the more the model gets trained.
So can we encourage same type of samples in the test data and the train and test data?
Same type in
Can
the
we
sense?
repeat? Same
No, no.
type means same
No.
type of samples.
No. Training set has to be different. Test set can you cannot use a training set into your evaluation. So you will have a separate set of training data, separate set of test data. You cannot have an overlap.
Oh.
You will
So,
have a
sir,
separate.
just
Yeah.
I have one more doubt, sir. So how can we, define a classification and this regression model analysis, sir?
So that again comes from your domain experience and the problem statement.
Oh.
So if you have a healthcare data, you should know what is the problem statement, what does the customer wants. And obviously the guy who understands the data, the person should understand the data. For that, he needs to have domain experience. If he doesn't have domain experience, he will not be able to figure out what the data is all about, right?
So excuse me, sir, I have one question. Maximum data sets they are dividing into testing 80%, training 80%, testing 20%. In some of the data set, they are going with validated data set. It is necessary, sir. I don't know what kind of application we need to take that validate data set separate.
So what happens is within a training set, you can split up into a training set and a validation set. What does the validation set do is it is basically to check whether you are basically testing overfitting. To test for overfitting of data, we use something called the validation set. Okay, and just to let you know, so when you talk of overfitting, in an overfitting scenario, what happens is your training errors are minimum, but your test errors seem to be very high. So how you can minimize your test errors? You basically do some validation on the training set. Okay, and then you go and evaluate using the test set.
Okay. Whether if I could have take the medical data as an input, it is can I take some validate data sets to reduce the error so that I cannot fall with overfit model now, sir?
Yes, you can do that.
Do that.
Yeah. Okay. And one
more question.
Mm-hmm.
Sir, when we take a data from a customer, then it is already told by the customer this is a training data or a testing data, or it is decided by us that which portion of data we need to take as a training.
Customer doesn't care. Yes, he only wants a model.
Okay, and we need to decide, sir, which data we need to take as a training and testing at that time? Or we randomly divide?
Yeah, randomly. It's random. You don't. If I've got millions of records, where you have the time to say which of things I should issue?
Yes,
it's a random. It's a random.
Okay, sir. Okay, thank you so much.
Okay. And the one more thing I want to talk to you about is feature scaling. Okay. Now, what happens is typically in a data where you have a lot of numbers in the features, and a lot of these numbers are in different scale. For example, I've got here age and salary. And age has got a range of, say, 21 to 60 working age. And your salary could be anywhere between 10,000 a month to 2 crores or 3 crores a month. Okay. 10,000 a month to 2 crores a month. And then if I were to do an analysis, graphical analysis of two variables having different scales, it is very difficult for machine learning algorithms. So what feature scaling does, it will try to bring all these values to a common base scale. Means it will try to bring it to a very small value, so that based on that, now you will be wondering how it does the mapping. You don't have to really bother about that because there are some functions which does it. So these functions which will try to bring these values to a common base scale, typically between -1 to 1 or -2 to +2, something like that. So based on that, it is easy for the particular algorithm to do a comparative analysis between the various variables. There are two main functions which are used. One is called the standard scaler and the other is called the min-max scaler. Now I will show you where they have used standard scale and min-max scale. That is, I mean, you can use any of those two functions, but anyway, I will share you the PPT with you. Don't worry after this, but I'll just show you what is this. So your standard scalar, this is the function which is used to calculate a value, x minus mean x divided by standard deviation. And for normalization, that is for doing the min-max scalar function, we use x minus mean x divided by the max minus mean x. Okay. Now let me go and show you how it works. Now suppose I have got x train. Now I have already done the split of x train. Sorry, x underscore train. Please understand that the variables are case sensitive, so be very careful. Okay, and I got x test, which is my test data of 2 records. Now, when I do this data pre-processing, that is when I use a feature scaling aspect of data pre-processing, I'm assuming that I'm using min-max scalar, suppose. I'm doing it on x train and x test. Now, when I see now the values of x train, see the value is something 0.619, 0.5, 0.612, 0.12. Earlier you had 48, 72,000 and so on, age and salary, correct? So these values have been brought down to a very small value, which is then used for the analysis, right? So this feature scaling is very, very important to be done. Similarly, if I do x test, you will see the values I got. So this is typically done on the features, the x train and x test. Okay, the test data of the independent variables and the test data, training data of the independent variables. Okay. Similarly, you had got standard scalar. So you could use standard scalar or you could min-max scalar. Now the question is which one you can use. You can use any of them. It doesn't matter. But typically, I've seen people have already used standard scalar from a performance perspective. Otherwise, it's both standard scalar and min-max scalar both are applicable or both are used. Have you now understood this data pre-processing steps, all of you? Is this clear?
Very much clear, sir.
Okay. Now, having done this, now let me get to one of these ANN algorithms. So what I'm going to do now, and I will tell you what is the problem statement. So I go back to my data set. Okay, and this is my select folder. And let me see whether I can restart my kernel. I'm just restarting my kernel so that I can just initialize all the values. It will be all blanked. Okay. Okay. I'm just restarting my kernel. Now there is something called, this is my data set. This is a finance company, that's a bank. The bank has got all this data. What all it has got? Customer ID, surname, credit score of that. This is all various customers, customer IDs. The geography where the customer belongs, the gender, age, how long is in the bank, what is the balance, the number of products he has subscribed to in the bank, whether he has got a credit card, whether he's an active member, what is the estimated salary, and I want to determine whether I want to check out the churning rate. That means, is the person likely to leave the bank or not? Is the person likely to leave the bank or not? And then the probable values of exited is 1 or 0. 1 means he's going to leave the bank and 0 is not going to leave the bank. And this is the data I've got from the bank. And as a data scientist, I need to come out with a model. Okay. So looking at this, what do you think are you dependent? Which is your dependent variable? Now, first of all, is this a classification data or it's a regression data?
Regression.
Why are you saying it's regression? So which is your dependent variable?
Credit score, sir.
See, what was my problem statement? My problem statement was whether a guy is going to leave the bank or not leave the bank. or whether the guy is going to exit the bank or not exit the bank. That is what I'm going to determine. And that determination can come out of various factors. One, what is his credit score, the number of products he's using, whether he has got credit card, is he active member. All these parameters will decide the probability of the person leaving the bank or not leaving the bank. So my exited yes or no, 1 or 0, becomes my dependent variable. So this is a classification data. And my independent variables will be remaining all. But obviously, some of the fields have no meaning. Customer ID, does it going to help? No. Because customer ID is unique for every customer. How is it going to help me in the analysis? Surname, I'm not interested in surname, right? Row number, no. Row number, what will I do with row number? I'm interested from the credit score. So my independent variable will start from the credit score, right up to the estimated salary. And that's my independent variable, sorry. And my dependent variable will be the last field, which is exited yes or no. Are you all clear on this data classification? Have you understood this?
Yes, sir. This is a classification technique, and cited is a dependent variable, and credit score is an independent variable.
No. Exited is your dependent variable, and all the remaining are independent variables.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Except for row number, customer ID, and surname, because that has no meaning, right? It has no implication on the from the analysis standpoint.
Okay, sir.
Okay. So now here I'm going to use the ANN model. So what I do first, I want it to run. I will go through the data pre-processing steps. So what are my data pre-processing steps? I import my NumPy. I import my Matplotlib. I import my pandas. Okay. Then I import my data set. And if I read my data set, I can go to Variable Explorer and I double click on data set. I should be able to see this is how my data set looks. Row number, customer, surname, credit score, gender, age, tenure, balance, number of products, does he have a credit card, is active member, estimated salary, and this is the one, 0 or 1 is the exited. So what I have done, my independent variable starts from X, fourth column. So my fourth column is what? From the credit score. This is my credit score. And my Y is the last column, which is my exited yes or no, 0 or 1. Okay. Right? Now, do you need to do data categorization here? Do you need to do data categorization here? Anybody? Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So my question to all of you is data categorization required? I explained to you what is data categorization as part of pre-processing. Remember?
Yes, sir.
Can someone go on mute, please? Thank you. So out of this data, do you think any data categorization is required for X?
Sir, may I please see data set once?
See, this is your data set, no? 1 minute. This is your data set.
Yeah. So geography, sir,
Geography and
gender. No,
perfect.
yeah, gender
Yeah.
also. Yeah, yeah.
Correct.
Yes, sir.
My X is starting from here. My X is from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Yeah, all are categorized. I think only geography and gender we need to.
Yes. So this is your independent variable,
Yeah.
and this is your dependent variable.
Yes, sir.
So you have to categorize gender and the geography.
Yes, yes. Yeah.
That's what I'm doing here. Okay. So I have done the data characterization. So now if I see the value of X, you will see these are the dummy variables, and then you have all the other values. Okay. So X is basically 12 columns. Because why it is 12 columns? Because it has created some 2-3 dummy variables also, right? Additional dummy variables. And then you have 1000, 10,000 is the number of data records. Okay. Then do we do feature scaling? Okay, before that, I will do a data split. So 80% is test and 20% is training. So 8,000 is training, and 2,000 is test. Okay. Then I use, as I said, since I'm going to have different number values, I will always do a feature scaling. So I do a standard scaler on the X train and X test. So I have done my data pre-processing step. I wanted to do this. So you guys so before I do this, I wanted to just do a sort of a recap of data pre-processing, because I don't know how many of you are knowing it or not, but it was good to get everybody familiarized with that, because otherwise you won't be able to understand what I'm doing here. So now you have completed the complete data pre-processing steps, and this part of your data preparation phase is completely done. Now here I'm doing so I'm using something called the Keras. Is one of the libraries from Google, which is used for in ANN, artificial neural networks. Okay, so I'm using this Keras. So I'm importing these libraries. Okay. Now see what I'm doing. First, I'm defining my hidden layer. So my hidden layer says that take 6 neurons in the hidden layer, use the activation function ReLU, which you know the ReLU was the activation function for my hidden layer. Input dimension 12, x1, x2, x3, x4 up to x12. That is my input dimensions, input variables, because that is where I'm going to apply my weights W1, W2 up to W12. So I have to first design my hidden layer. So this is my first hidden layer. Then I'm saying I'm going to add one more hidden layer. So I'm saying I will add one more hidden layer with 6 neurons. Now the decision of number of hidden layers will depend again based on your experience. You could have 2 hidden layers, 3, 4. So you have to try out various combinations to get the least mean square error or the lowest cost function. Okay. You have defined the second output hidden layer. Now I'm defining the output layer. And what is my activation function? Sigmoid, because my output is either 0 or 1. If I had multi-probabilistic, I would have gone for softmax or the threshold. So I'm using the activation function, sigmoid. Have you all guys got till this point what I've done? Have you all understood?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So now I have created my hidden layers. I have my inputs, and I have got the output layer, and I know the activation function which I'm using for the hidden layer and the activation function for the output layer. Once I've done this, now what I'm going to do is now I'm using this Adam as optimizer. So Adam is basically used for stochastic gradient. Okay, and entropy. Yeah, this is binary cross entropy because we are going to have values 0 and 1. So I'm going to use this particular stochastic gradient. Here I'm saying that out of the 8,000 records for the training set, I take a batch size of 10. That means I take 800 records at a time. I do a batch size of, so I take 800 records, do backward propagation. I take the 800 records, do a forward propagation, adjust the weights, do a backward propagation. Take the next 800 records, adjust the weights, do the same process. So I do the complete process, one epoch, then I do the second epoch, third epoch. So I am doing it 100 times. And then again, number of epochs again will vary based on experience. You can make epochs as a parameter, play around and see where you get the highest accuracy. Now what I'm doing, see, I'm executing this. Now see what it's doing. It is taking one epoch at a time. 800 records because the batch size of 10, 10, right? So there are 10, so batch sizes, there are 10, right? So there'll be 800. Okay. So there are 10 records at a time. So you have got total 8,000 records. So you'll have 800 times it will run, right? Per epoch. And then it will again run, again 800 10 times, again 800 10 times, 100 times, because there are 100 epochs. And see, if you see my accuracy, it was 33%, 34%, 35%. Sorry, my accuracy is here, my mistake. Okay. Yeah, this is my accuracy, right? So my accuracy, let me get it here. Okay. So now see, my loss is going down 0.34 and my accuracy is going up 86%. 86%, 87%. And I go till the bottom. So now it has got somewhere around 87% accuracy. Okay. I don't know, you have, all of you are aware of confusion matrix in classification? Do you all know what is confusion matrix? I'm presuming you should know all this. Yes or no?
No, sir.
You guys don't know confusion matrix? Okay.
Only theory, yeah, I know. Only table, but how to implement, I don't know.
So you, so I'm sure, okay. Let me open another. I'll just open one slide on, okay. Let me open one slide. I'll just show you what is confusion matrix. So when you're talking about confusion matrix, where in a classification model where you have got predicted value of 0 and 1 and actual value of 0 and 1. Okay, so this is my predicted test value and actual value, test value. So if my total samples is 100 and I am saying that my predicted and actual value both are zeros. 0 means in this case, say that he's not going to leave the bank. So there are 35. There are 50 cases where you have predicted that he is going to leave the bank and actually also going to leave the bank is 50. So your model is perfectly working fine. But there are 15 cases where the model is giving incorrect results, where here I'm predicting that he's going to leave the bank, but actually he's not left the bank. And here you are predicting that he is not going to leave the bank, but this is actually leaving the bank. Now this becomes a type 2 error. Why it is type 2? It's a very severe. So because you are predicting that he's not going to leave the bank, but actually he has left the bank. Then the model is giving you a very wrong results. In this case, you have predicted that he is going to leave the bank, but actually he has not left the bank. This is still manageable. But when you have a situation where there is not going to leave the bank, but actually is leaving the bank, then there's a problem with the model. That's why this is called the error. And this is called the type 1 error or false positive. And this is called the type 2 error or false negative. So when you measure the accuracy is this 85%. 35 plus 50 divided by 100, and error rate is 15%. This is how you calculate the, again, for your model to be effective, your accuracy should be more than 90%. Otherwise, I will not propose that model to the client. So having said that, if I come back to this, now I find out my predicted Y for my test data. And now I calculate the confusion matrix. And my confusion matrix says that my accuracy is 86%. See, this is around close to that, 86, 87. So my accuracy is 86%. Then what I will do? I will try to increase more number of hidden layers, try to increase epochs, again see the accuracy. I will try out various combinations and see wherever I can get the highest accuracy, or it should be more than 90%. This is how I work on a ANN model. Any questions on this? How we have executed this? Have you guys all understood this?
Sir, can you repeat confusion matrix again?
Okay. Actually, I was thinking you will be aware of confusion matrix because I'm talking of ANN. Anyways, never mind. So when I'm talking of confusion matrix, so you have, when you have done the predicted value which is coming from the model, and the actual value which is your test data. This is the predicted value of the test data and the actual value of test data. So there are these ones where my predicted value that he is not going to churn or he's not going to leave the bank, and the actual value is going to leave the bank, not going to leave the bank. There are 35 and there are 50 cases here where the model is predicting the same as what is the actual test data. But there are cases here for out of the 100 samples, there are 15 samples, the model is not giving you a correct behavior. That means my actual value is 0, but my predicted value is 1. My actual value is 1, but predicted value is 0. So these are the errors. And this is called the error rate, which is 15%. So you have to minimize this error rate in order for your confusion accuracy to be higher. And that accuracy which you saw here is what you see here in this particular. Okay. Did you get that, madam?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. So this is how you calculate the efficiency of a model. Okay, in a classification with the classification data, and that is called the confusion matrix. Okay. So have you understood this? I mean, this is very important. Okay. And I will quickly run through one.
Sir,
yeah, please go ahead.
I have a doubt, sir. Sir,
Sure.
can we plot confusion matrix for speech data, sir? For any type of data? Speech. Actually, I'm doing work on speech enhancement. So can we plot confusion matrix for speech
Yeah.
data?
Provided it's a classification data.
Yes, yes, sir. I have
Yeah,
implemented a class.
Yeah. As long as the dependent variable is a classification data, labeled classification data, having a discrete values, you are fine with that. Yes.
Yes. Okay.
It is basically used for classification data. Confusion matrix is only used for classification data. For regression, there is something called the R square. To measure the R square. Mean square error is basically your cost function in regression.
Okay.
But to calculate the efficiency of a regression model, you use something called the R square. And to calculate the efficiency of a classification model, you use the confusion matrix.
Okay, thank you.
So I will quickly run through another example. This is a regression data where you have these various data. Now, this combination of annual salary, credit card debt, these are the various attributes of a customer which will decide whether the car purchase amount. What should be the purchase amount, the amount, the value of the car is going to buy. Okay, what is the, so basically working on, and you want like develop model to predict the total amount the customers are willing to pay given the attributes. So this is the data again you have got from a car company, and you are trying to come out with a model. So you are trying to predict the purchase amount, the buying power of a person based on his profile. Okay. Now, again, you are importing all the libraries, import pandas. Now this I've already executed, so I'm not executing again. Importing pandas, NumPy, Matplotlib, and then Seaborn, as I've told you, is very important library which is used. This is my car purchasing data, which has got all these variables. These are all the variables, and car purchase amount is my dependent variable, and others are the independent variable. Now, out of which, now this is how you look at the, what is the need of a SNS, or is called the heat map, is essentially I can compare two variables. So if I see these two variables, if there is X and Y, this means that they are linearly dependent. They are positively dependent. If I have a scattered like this, means those variables are not dependent on each other. It is hardly dependent on each other. If I would have something like this, then it would have been negatively dependent. So this using the SNS library, or it's called a plot, I can do a sort of a relationship between multiple independent or even with dependent variables. Okay. Now to calculate X, I am not concerned about customer name, email, and country, okay, and purchase amount. So because purchase amount is going to be my dependent variable, so I will eliminate. So my X is going to be gender, age, annual salary, credit card debt, and net worth. And my Y will be my purchase amount. So there are total 500 records. Out of this is my independent variable, and this is my dependent variable. Now, only thing difference here is this is a regression data where the car purchase amount is not fixed. It is a continuous variable. Now, here I am going to see how I am going to use the ANN. Okay. So just forget this for now. Training the model. So here I am using TensorFlow. So Keras is a library within TensorFlow. I use all these layers. I take one input. There are 5 input layers. There are 5 features, right? I've got 5 features here. Which are those 5 features? Independent variables: gender, age, annual salary, credit card, and debt. So these are X1, X2, X3, X4, X5. So there are 5 input dimensions. This is one hidden layer. This is the second hidden layer. So I've got 25 neurons, and 1 neuron for output. And here I'm using activation equal to linear. If you remember in classification, I use sigmoid. If you remember, I use sigmoid. In this case, since it's a regression data, I use an activation called linear, right? And then I ran these again epochs, and then I come to the accuracy. This is my loss, and this is loss is 0.00. Okay. And if I want to find the value, now if you see here, as the number of epochs increases, my error goes down. As the number of epochs increases, my loss is going down. Okay. Validation loss is loss because of overfitting. So that is also going down. And if I want to predict, once the model is ready, if I want to predict the salary, I take, this is my input parameters for those 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I predict from the model the purchase amount, and this becomes my predicted amount, which is 226,642. Okay. So if as long as my losses are very close to zero, that means this model is perfect, and this is the estimated value coming out of the model if I feed these as the input parameters or the input features to the model. Okay. So this is an example of how I used ANN for a linear regression model, and previously I showed you how to use ANN for a classification model. Any questions on this?
Sir, instead of ReLU, can any other activation function is in used?
No, in hidden layer, I've seen generally ReLU is used.
Okay, sir.
This is mainly for the hidden layers.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. So I have completed my portion. Any questions? I've completed my sections on ANN architecture. I've talked to you about data pre-processing, and I've ran through two use cases. One is a regression use case, and one is a classification use case.
Sir, I would like to integrate whether in the previous one, in the classification example, the accuracy was around 85%.
87%.
Sir,
Correct.
Yeah. If I want to increase the accuracy, so should I have put it the epochs more than whatever I
One
use?
is you try to increase the number of hidden layers.
Yeah.
You can try with multiple hidden layers, or you can try to increase the epochs, both combinations. So you'll have to play out with various combinations.
Okay, sir.
Okay, with number of hidden layers also, there could be an increase in accuracy possible, and epochs also. So you have to play around with various. That's why this takes a lot of time. You have to play around with various, because these are all variables, right? The number of hidden layers, the number of epochs. This you, as through experience, you will come to. You'll see what happens. So you'll have to try out various parameters.
Sir, I have one more question, sir. While defining a dense, you are giving unit value. No, sir. How to give that if my data set is around 100? How could I give that unit value? Defining dense. Sir, we are feeding the classifier dense value, no, sir.
Yeah, this is for the output layer, no? Output
will be unit 1, sir. That is, I'm okay.
This is again through experience. Yeah, so you can decide you're going to have 10 neurons, or you're going to have 15 neurons, or whatever, right? So that is again, you have to try out those things.
Sir, for example, here we have a 12 dimension. Input data is 12. So that will be a 12 attributes. So you have divide 6 and 6. In that base, we need to give, sir?
No, there's nothing like that. It's nothing to do with the number of variables.
Okay, sir. Then how could I give this unit value that I have?
So unit value. Can somebody want to mute the lot of noise?
Sir, I have muted.
I don't know, somewhere else was coming. I think that was somewhere. See, if you see this example, right? See, this number of this doesn't depend on the number of values, correct? So I could have n number of input values, but the number of neurons, this is your unit equal to how much? This is again coming through experience. Whether you're going to use 4 neurons, 5 neurons. So typically you may use 4 neurons here, you may use 6 neurons here, then you may use 8 neurons here, and then again 1 layer. So you will have to, this is something you can play around with. There is no fixed rule that because there are 12 dimensions, you have to use 4, 6, and 6. Nothing that this has no relationship with this number of different variables, because these are all interconnected, right? So you will have W1 X1, you will have W1, the weights are get calculated everywhere, and then your activation function, and then you'll have a net value output. So there is no fixed dense value. You will have to try out various options.
Various option. Okay. First, if it is salary, I have a 4 attribute that is closely related to that salary means, then I can consider that unit value, like that you are saying us.
No, unit value is nothing to do with the number of inputs. That's what I'm saying.
Oh, we need to try with different values.
Yeah, there's no relation, no. You have got any number of input values. You could have 5 neurons. There's no one-to-one relationship here. This in the hidden layer and this inputs. No.
Okay, sir, I have one more doubt. While testing and training data, we are dividing, no, sir. In that, random number is equal to, sometimes we are giving 0, sometimes they are giving 1.
So internally, when you say random, it internally decides how much from which it has to take as training data, which it has to take as test data. Whether it should take in the top out of 100, first 80 should be training and last 20 should be test, or it could be random state. That will decide. It will assign a random number, and it will arbitrarily decide how much 80% is training data, how much 20% is test data. So there is no fix. So random state 0 is generally used. So it will take first 8 records as training and last 2 records as test, for example. But I could have random state 42, 50. So it could have different random states. You can just do some more research on that. But you can decide using random state, how should you distribute the training and test data?
Okay, sir, I'm a beginner, so only I have posted.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sir,
No,
then
right,
I
sir,
have
absolutely.
sir, I have one more doubt, sir. You are saying that batch size, no, sir. If totally I have 100 records, each batch I will consider as a 10, 10, 10.
You
And
decide
then
on the batch size. So you will have 10. So you will have 10 times it will run into 10 records at a time.
okay. Batch size
Okay.
is number of records.
Number of records it will take for doing the backward and forward recognition at a time.
At a time, okay. Backward and forward.
We talked about the stochastic descent. No, you saw that bullet points I told you.
Yes.
This one I explained you, right?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Where is that? This is the one, right? Yeah. This, remember, we talked about.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah.
If you choose some of the neural network, it will do only in, for example, CNN, that will only do the forward neural network, isn't it, sir?
No. CNN works on a different architecture, ma'am. So CNN first will go through pooling and all those stuff, right?
Okay.
And then it will finally come with the native features which are used as input to ANN.
Okay, so if you go, if I take data set and I'm going with ANN means, it will applicable both forward and backward.
That's how it works. Yeah. Stochastic gradient descent works that way. Yeah.
Okay, sir.
Any other question? Have you guys understood? Did you guys enjoy this session?
Really, sir, session. Yes, sir. Really, it is good, sir.